Welcome to the Leader Post Rider Rumblings podcast, episode 149. Taylor Shire and Darrell Davis are with you for another chat as we talk about the Saskatchewan Roughriders, now 7 games without a win, dating back to July 19th. It has sure felt like a long time, and even in the Riders' post-game media conference following their 26-21 loss to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers on the weekend, it was a lot of, Trevor Harris saying, I don't really want to talk about this anymore. I don't know what else to say. And I'm sick and tired of talking about losing. And frankly, I'm sure you share the same sentiment as me. I don't really even know how to start. This team just continues to find ways to lose, and they're unable to find a way to win.
That's true. But fortunately, Taylor, you and I are experienced at covering a team that goes 7 games without a win, right? For the last 2 years, it's happened. And now they're drawing fairly or unfairly comparisons to those last 2 seasons when Craig Dickinson was coaching them and they spiraled out of control at the end of each season. I don't see the same spiraling. We've talked about this one before, that they're close. They had one bad game against Edmonton, but being close doesn't help a whole lot and might even be more frustrating, and that's why Trevor Harris is speaking the way he is.
And close doesn't mean drastic changes either. They obviously went through a major sort of rebuild, retooling this offseason, bringing in Corey Mace. There's not going to be a coaching change. There's not going to be a general manager change at this point in the season, which during other bye weeks on a 7-game skid or other teams, you would probably say there needs to be changes if you're winless in 7 heading into a bye week. However, they're still in playoff contention. If you look at the West Division standings, I don't see BC and Winnipeg giving up those first 2 spots. Saskatchewan still sits in 3rd, but Edmonton is coming on strong. They obviously are coming off back-to-back wins over Calgary, and they entered this week 1 point back of Saskatchewan. Now the Riders, of course, are on a bye week, so they're going to have to win at some point if they want to squeeze into the playoffs. It doesn't look like, I think you wrote about it this week, it doesn't look like a home playoff game is really realistic anymore unless BC or Winnipeg trails off. But to get into the playoffs, the Riders will need to finish above 500, if not better, in their last stretch of games.
I agree with you in terms of BC and Winnipeg being better than Saskatchewan and likely getting those home playoff games. I think BC's ready to rock and roll, so that'll be the toughest one. For the Roughriders, it's fortunate they have a game against Edmonton. That could really turn the tide. That tie against Ottawa may end up helping the Roughriders. I know they would have liked the victory, and if the command center hadn't got involved or maybe stayed in its place, maybe they would have a victory for that one. But the fact that they play Edmonton once, they have a game against BC, they have a game against Ottawa, but also they get 2 against Calgary, and Calgary looks to be the worst team in the league at the moment. So that can help them. If they lose those games, their next game after the bye is against Calgary. Losing against Calgary, well, if they do that, then they deserve to not make the playoffs. And I think those are the games that will really determine whether this team goes forward. But they're a playoff team, Taylor. Don't you think they're good enough? I do too. I think that they're good enough to be a 3rd-place team. They maybe haven't shown it lately, and they've fallen into a bit of an abyss, but it's not horrible, and it's easy for them to climb out. But they seem to be talented enough, spirited enough, well-coached enough to make the playoffs, don't they?
I think they're an okay team. I don't think they're a great team. But if you would have asked me after the first 6 weeks when they were 5-1, I would have said, "Oh, this team is trending upwards, and they're going to be a great team this year." And the defense is forcing turnovers. The offense is generating. Even with Shea Patterson, the offense did an okay job, and we were expecting that to increase when Trevor Harris returned. The injuries along the offensive line certainly hasn't helped, and I think the defense is not playing. Well, they're obviously not playing as well as they did the first 7 weeks, and I think that's a major part in why this team hasn't won lately. But you can't put the blame on them because they haven't necessarily given up these sort of plays. We talk about 2 or 3 plays. It hasn't been the defense's fault why they're losing. It's been other reasons why this team hasn't picked up a win, and the defense isn't playing that well, but they also don't get the blame.
Yeah, stupid little things have happened to the Roughriders. And I know a lot of people will say, well, good teams learn how to win. Bad teams keep losing. And maybe that's where they are at the moment. But they correct 1 or 2 little things. Mary Alford, they're great. He's a great return man. We were wondering about him earlier in the season, but he shows he's still got it. But then he drops a punt into the end zone, right, against Winnipeg. Bad clock management against Toronto right at the end of the game cost them at least a chance to go into overtime. Brett Lother, their dependable kicker, misses 4 field goals in one game. So there's so many little things that have gone wrong for this football team. But I think that's what we listen to Corey Mace when he talks about it. Little things that they talk about that they know they have to correct. And they work on them. They obviously work on them. And so why do they go wrong? Well, it's just, can you say it's bad luck sometimes? I guess it's as simple as that on occasion, right? The good teams kind of rebound. And we've watched Winnipeg go from 0-4 to 7-6 now, right? So on a 5-game winning streak. So the Bombers know how to do that. They've been there before. The Roughriders don't yet. This is an adversarial, a difficult time for them, let's say. And because of that, it's going to make them better. And I think they'll get a chance to get better. But they talk about it being a lesson, and everybody goes, oh, okay, I'm tired of it being a lesson. But they are learning from it, and it will make them better down the road.
Yeah, I don't know if it's luck. They haven't gotten the breaks. They haven't gotten the bounces over the skid, but they also haven't executed. I look at, most of the 6 games that they lost previous to this last one, and obviously the tie in there. There was instances in the game where you could say, oh, this is where they lost the game. You mentioned the Alford fumble. So you can go back and look at the game. But then in the loss to Winnipeg on the weekend, I was sort of thinking about what the turning point was, and like the blocked punt, I think was a big point. So you miss one block and the punt is blocked, and then all of a sudden Winnipeg scores points on that. Trevor Harris obviously threw one bad turnover earlier in the game, and then obviously the clinching interception was costly. So you look at those 2 throws, and was that the 2 or 3 plays that we talk about in a game? But there wasn't one play here or there that defined the loss for them on the weekend in Winnipeg. So in saying that, they also didn't have any plays where they went and stole the game. Like Trevor didn't put together a drive to go win the game. And that's how you have to win in this league. You have to make those plays when it counts. So they're not getting the breaks, sure, but they're also not executing when it matters.
Yeah, Mark Mueller, their offensive coordinator, is taking some heat because, as you said, this team isn't producing. And they finally tried a different type of play, right? That little shovel pass. It was 2nd and 8. So it was an interesting call, but a horrible time to call it. So, that's the type of play you do on 1st and 10, somewhere when you're down in goalpost area, already within field goal range or something. And they were desperate then. And try those at other times. I think, they're always a genius if it works out, and they're always stupid if it doesn't work out. That's kind of the way we see it at football, from the fans' perspective, the media's perspective, and we can criticize it. But let's talk about real quickly a couple of things that you might change. Like we talk about, why doesn't he run the football more often? And on offense, why do they play so much zone defense? Are those 2 things, are they simple enough to just run the football and switch to man-to-man defense once in a while? Would that really help this team?
The running the football thing is interesting. When Frankie Hickson came in and he, for AJ Ouellette, and he had that great first half, was against Montreal, and then all of a sudden they went away from the run game because they didn't have the ball in the second half. I feel like this team hasn't had a run game like that since. And if you are able to establish a run, and we always talk about, or the football minds always talk about, you got to establish a run and establish a run, and that's how you're going to win. I also think it's just very hard in the CFL to establish the run when you only have 3 downs. And if you only pick up 2 yards on first down, well, then you're forced into a tough situation. And if that happens drive after drive after drive, and you're faced with 2nd and long time and time again, you're again going to be forced into a tough situation. So you're going to probably look to throw on first down. And I think that's what the Riders are more inclined to do, is throw high percentage plays, or even take a shot on first down, and you're still left with 2nd and long if it's not successful, or you generate first downs from there. So I've never believed in the run game being of the utmost importance in the CFL because of the downs. So I wouldn't say the problem is, establishing the run. Obviously it does help. And I think it helps pick up wins late in the 4th quarter. I think that's probably the most important time, when you have the lead, to be able to run. But I don't necessarily think early. I think AJ Ouellette will be a big addition to this team when he does return, when it gets colder, when we're into that playoff type of football. So I think that's going to be important to the run game down the stretch. But I just think this team doesn't have the they have the talent, but I feel like nobody is stepping up and becoming that go-to playmaker on second down and making those catches on second down like we've seen. Sam Emlis is a good player. Schaefer Baker is a good player. Sean Bain's a good player, but they don't have that one guy who's stepping up and making those plays when they need it.
Yeah, the clutch guys, you're right. And fewer drops last game, which is better for their offense, but those have really hurt them. How about defense? When we've talked to Joshua Bell, the defensive backs coach, who loves playing zone because of all the opportunities for turnovers. And early on in the season, it was helping them out. Now everybody knows they're playing zone and they're finding their soft spots, right? 10, 12, 14 yards downfield. Even Brady Oliveira is settling into those spots for easy passes. It killed the Riders on that 3rd and 15 against Toronto earlier this year. So they're getting too predictable on defense too, I believe. Do you think that some blitzes and some more man-to-man coverages might help them defensively?
Yeah, I think pressure always helps. Pressure up front is going to help the defensive backs. I'm surprised they haven't blitzed more and then just played man in the back. But it's hard for me to argue with how successful Corey Mason and his defense have been over the last several years in Toronto. So I don't know if that's a personnel thing where the Toronto defense was the talent that they had was more suited to play that man, and Saskatchewan's maybe not some, or to play zone, and Saskatchewan's not so much, and maybe they'd rather play man. But Corey has also said that he's willing to give up the yards to play the zone and obviously force the turnovers, but they're just not getting those turnovers. So it's hard for me to, like I said, it's hard for me to argue about Corey Mason's strategies on his defensive play, but I would like to see at least man on some instances and a lot of pressure, because I think that's where you become successful, is when you can pressure the quarterback, whoever it is, whatever team it is, you pressure the quarterback, you force the quarterback to make a tough throw into man coverage. Sure, you might get beat once or twice, but then you're going to also either get a sack, potentially an interception, or some other lucky play, right?
Well, they have a bye week coming up. They're not playing this week. There's 3 teams with bye weeks, which is one of the quirks of the CFL schedule. So the Roughriders can go back to the drawing board a little bit and maybe take a peek at some of these things. I know they do a lot of self-assessment. Coaches do that. Players do that. And maybe these are the types of things that they will notice and say, oh boy, we're trending badly in this situation, so we may have to change that up. And they've got a week now to do it. I got a kick out of your comment earlier that this is the bye week when everybody goes, oh, it's time to fire the coaches, and you hear the crowd going, the fans are going crazy, right? The call-in shows and the letters to the editor and all the things that come in. Oh, we got to make changes. No, they don't have to make changes. They've committed to this program. They've committed to Corey Mace. They've committed to Jeremy O'Day for 3 years. Trevor Harris, at least for this year, that's been part of the discussion. Where's he fit in the future? I don't think you have to worry about that until the end of the year. Trevor Harris, even though people are sometimes calling to replace him now with Shea Patterson, who played pretty well in Harris's absence, there's no way you do that. Trevor Harris gives this team a better chance to win through this season. Try to get them into the playoffs this year, see how far they go, and then figure out if there's a future there, because that's a change that I don't think you make right now in the middle of the season.
Yeah, unless you're out of the playoffs, and like mathematically, I don't think Trevor should be starting. If you're mathematically eliminated with a few weeks left, sure, give Shea Patterson, even Jack Cohen a few starts down the stretch. But I will say one thing that they won't lose this week. I know that they won't lose this week, so the winless streak, well, it will be extended another week in this season. But
July 19th sounds like a long time ago,
isn't it? It's crazy, yeah. But when I think about this bye week, I don't know how many injuries are going to be healed up in a week, but if they can get a few guys back from injury over this next break here, I think that will help them. The mental reset, just kind of coming back after a bye week, will help them for that Calgary game, which, again, I think I said it last week, until it's mathematically a must-win game, it's not a must-win game in my opinion. But I think they need this Calgary game, or else, like you said earlier, I don't see them making the playoffs unless they can get by Calgary, even for their psyche, especially for the standings.
Yeah, you have to beat Calgary. Calgary's floundering, changing quarterbacks. Who knows what's happening in Calgary? But you got to be ruthless. You just say, okay, we're taking over. And interesting that Craig Dickinson is a consultant with the Calgary Stampeders, a former Riders coach. So he's going to play a bit of a role in Saskatchewan's playoff fortunes again this year somehow, or whether he's going to his team is either going to help the Rough Riders or hurt the Rough Riders, because Calgary is a desperate football team too, and the changes they're making are out of desperation. So are they any good? No, they're still not very good. They showed that, losing back-to-back home and home against Edmonton. Edmonton's one of those hot teams. The Rough Riders don't have it easy. And if Calgary plays like a team that has nothing to lose because they're so desperate, the Rough Riders could be in trouble. Like we say, if they can't beat Calgary, then you may as well write them off.
Yeah. And one thing I was going to talk about, I don't know if they're going to get healthy on the offensive line over this bye week, but that's one thing that I would say has been almost a positive is their offensive line depth over this season. They've had, I think, 15 different players play along the offensive line. I've counted 15,
but I'm including the 2 defensive guys who have gone over there to play, which still counts, desperate times.
But right? If you look at the 6-game injured list, they have 5, a starting offensive line.
Yeah.
Jamarcus Hardrick, Jacob Brammer would be your tackles, Philip Blake, Peter Godber, Ryan Sevier, Zach Fry's on there too. So you have 6 starting caliber offensive linemen that are on the injured list. And still, looking at last game, I don't believe they gave up a sack. Obviously, they haven't really established the run, and I think that goes back to that a little bit, where you need a good offensive line to produce a good running game. But that's one thing that has surprised me, is just the quality of depth that they have somehow found along the offensive line to plug and play all of these players week after week after week, to somehow still have a decent offensive line at this point in the season with all these injuries is, I think, one of the positives of the season for them.
Yeah, amazing. No sacks surrendered against Winnipeg's great defensive line. And to say that they've had 15 guys play offensive line is absolutely amazing. And I know Jeremy O'Day, the general manager, gets heat, but if you can find that many offensive linemen to play in one season, it's pretty impressive. So they're doing the job that they're supposed to do in terms of personnel. It has changed the cadence of their offense quite a bit, though, right? Trevor Harris he's as good as there is in the league at the pre-snap reads and finding out and throwing quickly. He's had to throw exceptionally quickly, right? He's usually a 3-step drop guy. It's like 1 step and throw now, because they're so worried about their offensive line, justifiably so, although it's performing better than we thought it would. The fact that they still realize they don't have a long time in the pocket means that they've changed their offense. It prevents them from going deep, might prevent them from running the football. So those offensive linemen, yes, they're good. It's amazing, as you say, but I think it's made them change up what they're doing a little bit just to be on the safe side, and it's obviously cost them.
Mm-hmm. And looking ahead, I look at this next. I believe every game but the Ottawa game, or every game but the Ottawa game, is against a West Division opponent. Like you said earlier, I don't necessarily think they're a great team. I don't necessarily think they're going to win the Grey Cup. I think I said that last week, that they're not a contender in my opinion. But sometimes this adversity and finding ways to lose can help you win when it comes down to some of these games down the stretch. If they get into a tough situation, they can, you got to learn to lose to learn to win. And I think the fact that they're still in contention somehow, despite not winning in 7 games, is going to pay off. And it might not even be this year, but going through this adversity and learning how to lose before you win. Obviously, they've had 2 terrible seasons leading up to this, but I think sometimes adversity like this can pay off. And I don't necessarily, like I said, I don't think they're going to win it all this year, but I think going through this with this young head coaching, this young staff and a rookie head coach, I think will eventually pay off down the road.
Yeah, it's going to make their coaches better and more aware of what they need to do. They'll admit that they're kind of new at this, at running the entire show. And I don't think Corey Mace has shown great sideline tactics he's still involved with the defense. And I was wary of that to start with, and I think a lot of people are now too. Maybe Corey Mace should I know he's a great defensive coordinator. His fingerprints are already all over the defense. They should be. But let him just focus on being a full-time head coach, and that will make him better on the sidelines. And those tough tactical situations, he'll handle them better. It's amazing his calmness on the sidelines. It's been impressive that he doesn't flip out and start yelling and screaming. You can tell he's thinking things over, but he hasn't always been in these situations. You think of Don Matthews and Wally Bono and Kent Austin and Mike O'Shea, some of these great sideline tacticians who never make a mistake in terms of how to use the clock. I think Corey Mace would be capable of getting there once he gets more experience in this. And the losing, It sounds stupid, doesn't it, when we say that? It helps. Down the road, you say, you know what? I remember this. This is what we did before, and we've learned this lesson. And they've spoken about that, how they've learned to run the clock better in certain situations. So it does help them. It makes you realize how much you hate losing, because when you're a professional athlete or a professional coach, you never want to lose. That's your livelihood, is winning the game. So they're getting a little desperate, but I think they're also learning from the situation, and that will help them. If they do turn it around, I covered this team in 1989, and they got hot right at the end of the season, and that's all that matters sometimes. Are they a Grey Cup team? No, they're probably not a Grey Cup contender. They're a playoff qualifier for sure, in my mind. And if you get hot, though, crazy things happen in a short playoff run.
Well, we will see. We still have, of course, a few weeks to go before we really talk about how things are going to heat up in the playoff race, but it's certainly becoming almost must-win territory for the Saskatchewan Roughriders heading down the stretch. All right, that'll do it for episode number 149 of the Rider Rumblings podcast. Darrell, thanks, as always, for chatting.
Thanks, Taylor. Enjoy the bye week.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks.